Good morning, and thank you for coming. We're going to go ahead and begin this press conference. We're going to start this press conference out with a moment of silence and honor and memory of not only Craig Tiger, Officer Craig Tiger, but all PTSD sufferers, veterans, first responders, and others. If you would. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Joe Clore, and I'm the president of the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association. I'll give you a rundown of how this press conference is going to proceed, but first I'd like to note a couple of attendees. We have in the audience Representative Kelly Townsend and Representative Jay Lawrence. We appreciate your support.
Joe?
Yes. And also Representative Doug Coleman. We greatly appreciate your response and attention to this very critical issue. I'd also like to thank our brothers, our public safety brothers from fire, they're in here somewhere, for their support. I really appreciate it, guys. I know you go through a lot of the same. As well as the other City of Phoenix labor associations, Ron Ramirez from Aspetia, Frank Paccioli from Unit 3, and I'm not sure who all else. The other thing, we're going to have 4 speakers. It'll be myself, the president of the Phoenix Sergeant Lieutenants Association, Sean Matson. We're also going to have a speaker, retired Phoenix Police Captain Tom Bloodworth. Tom Bloodworth was my first captain on the Phoenix Police Department when I was assigned to Maryville in 1982. Tremendous respect for that man. He has a great reputation and is in fact a true leader. And then we'll also have from the community Roger Lohr, who is a pastor in the city of Phoenix and a community action member. He will also be speaking. As I said, I'm Joe Clore, president of the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association, which represents approximately 2,300 rank-and-file Phoenix police officers. On November the 8th, we learned of the very tragic suicide death of former Phoenix police officer Craig Tiger. Craig was a 12-year veteran of the Phoenix Police Department with an unblemished record and a commitment to service. On June 5th, 2012, Officer Tiger was involved in a police shooting. Later ruled in policy, that took the life of a man threatening to harm children at a park with a bat. Officer Tiger did not know it at the time, but that event would forever change his life and ultimately lead to his death. As a result of this tragic incident, he developed PTSD. And I would like to stop right there and comment on the name PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I actually think it should be called post-traumatic stress injury because, in fact, that's what it is. It's not a disorder, it's an injury. So I will try to refer to it as PTSI henceforth. As a result of the traumatic incident, he developed PTSI. The only problem is so often the case he did not realize it. He suffered from nightmares and could not sleep. He also began to drink every night to ease the pain. On June 5th, 2013, the one-year anniversary of the shooting, Craig headed up north to his family cabin to commit suicide as he did not feel he could stand the pain any longer. However, before he got there, he was stopped and arrested for DUI, an event he credits with saving his life. Due to his obvious condition as a danger to himself, he was ordered to undergo inpatient treatment for 30 days. It was there that he was formally diagnosed with PTSI tied to the officer-involved shooting. He received medication and counseling for his PTSI and further treatment and counseling for his alcoholism. Craig was responding well to treatment and making forward progress. Upon his release from the treatment center, he was placed on administrative leave while the police department conducted an internal investigation in regards to the DUI arrest. In October 2013, Chief Garcia, who had recently enacted a new Get Tough policy on DUIs, believed this offense was serious enough to bypass the normal disciplinary review board process and ordered a Laudermill, a termination hearing, instead. I personally attended the hearing with Officer Tiger. He was very well spoken and remorseful with regards to the DUI and readily accepted the fact that he should receive stiff discipline short of termination. He explained all of this. He explained all that he had been through since the shooting, the nightmares, the graphic visions he could not get out of his head, the drinking, and the pain. He told Chief Garcia that he had been diagnosed with PTSI and even provided medical documentation to support it. He and I both pleaded with Chief Garcia not to terminate his employment and further explained that he was currently undergoing treatment and progressing very, very well. Chief Garcia was unmoved. In an act of complete, cold-hearted callousness, he terminated Officer Tiger. Chief Garcia was recently quoted in the paper about all the various resources available to officers in need of help. It's important to note that Chief Garcia's own discipline policy allows for discipline other than termination for DUI. Instead, he refused to consider the totality of the circumstances and denied Officer Tiger a second opportunity, an officer who was injured on the job, and fired him. I believe this decision in and of itself is indisputable evidence of Chief Garcia's position on PTSI. Furthermore, after learning of the suicide of Officer Tiger, Chief Garcia failed to make any type of statement for several days, even though the issue was obviously boiling to the surface as a topic of concern to the officers on the department and the citizens in the community. His inability to express even one iota of understanding of PTSI and how it impacts officers, or to even address the issue, was shocking, disappointing, and uninspiring. In his words and actions certainly did not instill confidence that the chief has the interest, care, and concern to look out for the well-being of Phoenix police officers. In fact, quite the opposite, as evidenced by the recent statement in the Arizona Republic when Chief Garcia, in an interview on the very issue, stated, quote, "There's no officer that can stand behind mental health issues or substance abuse issues and use that as a defense on criminal violations," end quote. This is why Chief Garcia has zero credibility with the rank-and-file Phoenix police officers with regard to PSI. He has clearly demonstrated that he, at worst, is malicious and at best indifferent to the issue. That is why he cannot solve the issue going forward. He has no credibility. The Phoenix Law Enforcement Association and the supervisors represented by the Phoenix Police Sergeants and Lieutenants Association have truly gone the extra mile in the last 2.5 years to work with and get along with Chief Garcia. We were committed to his success from the beginning. Unfortunately, he is devoid of true leadership skills and has proven to be a tyrant and a bully who manages through threats, fear, and intimidation. There have been a litany of transgressions committed by Chief Garcia over the past 2.5 years, and the incident involving this mishandling of Officer Craig Tiger was simply the last straw in a long list of transgressions. Recently, Chief Garcia showed his true colors to the public in the lobby of City Hall when News 5 reporter Donna Rossi tried to interview him regarding Craig Tiger and the issue of PTSI. This was not an ambush interview. The chief was aware that Ms. Rossi wanted to ask him questions. His conduct was appalling and nothing short of abusive and offensive. The intimidation, bullying, and general unprofessional conduct exhibited in that video is the Chief Garcia that many of us know all too well, and is the type of behavior Phoenix police officers of all ranks have seen on many occasions from him. Chief Garcia should literally keep his hands off the free press. The men and women who daily serve the citizens of this community and who daily put themselves in harm's way deserve a true leader that understands the concept of servant leadership. Not a tyrant that uses intimidation and bullying tactics and whose idea of leadership is coming up with new programs, gimmicks, and catchphrases every other month. By the same token, the citizens of Phoenix, who are the real boss, deserve much, much better. It is for these reasons that both associations, representing 99% of the Phoenix Police Department, are jointly calling for a vote of no confidence on Chief Garcia. Thank you. And now Sean Matson from the Phoenix Police Sergeants and Lieutenants Association will address. Thank you.
Greetings. Thank you all for attending. Joe recognized all the dignitaries and our brother unions that are present today. My name is Sean Matson. I'm the president of the Phoenix Police Sergeants and Lieutenants Association. My organization represents approximately 400 supervisors on the Phoenix Police Department. It's a sad and unfortunate day anytime you see labor groups announce that they will be holding a vote of no confidence. Unfortunately, we've come to this point. Each association's executive board has given serious thought and consideration as to how to react to continued missteps and lack of leadership by Chief Daniel Garcia. I can assure you that this decision has not been made lightly or been done overnight. In fact, for the past few years, Plea and PPSLA have done everything they can to make the chief successful. The chief has been instructed by the city manager's office to open up lines of communication and dialogue with both labor unions in an effort to create a harmonious environment between management and labor. I think it's critical to point out labor's relationship with the police chief and a little bit of the history. He was hired under the mindset to create an open dialogue with his employees and to communicate more because we were coming out of pretty dark time in the police department's history. When he got the job, he immediately started making changes and changing the face of the Phoenix Police Department to operate more like his former department. And that's ironic because at the same time, he was bragging about how the Phoenix Police Department was the best police department in the country, yet he wanted us to be more like Dallas. As he did this, many times the labor groups would bring caution to his doorstep, caution that he since ignored. Next, Plea and PPSLA pointed out the morale was beginning to decline. In fact, it was plummeting at a great rate. He denied those charges and said morale was great. So both labor units, at a great expense in both time and finances, put together a survey where we polled the members and asked what the state of morale was. We knew it was bad, but when the numbers came in, it was atrocious. His response to that, and I quote, "Morale is not my problem, it's the responsibility of the individual." So he goes from saying that morale is great to having the data saying that it's not great and being dismissive. Any reasonable executive would take stock in that data and do something about it. Labor was accused of, actually by the media, we were accused of potentially turning that survey into a vote of no confidence. We didn't. We wanted to use that data in order to better the relationship with police management and let it grow. Plea and PPSLA even hosted a multi-day retreat in which labor and management can open up those lines of communication. That retreat was attended by police management, including Chief Garcia, but the assigned tasks and committees that were formed out of it fell to the wayside, and very little work was done. I believe it was just a show on management's behalf, where Plea and PPSLA both were dedicated to the cause. For the past year, Plea and PPSLA have continued to try to extend an olive branch to provide input to make this chief successful, but have had that olive branch slapped away at each and every time. It seems that these officers have been fruitless, and now we are at these crossroads. So the folks these efforts were fruitless, and we're at these crossroads. I'm confident that the vote will show that the employees of the Phoenix Police Department are looking for change in leadership, to have a police chief who will lead them properly and give them their own confidence to do their job. That to have a police chief that will support them and treat them fairly. That is the case. If the results will show a lack of confidence, then maybe it's time for a new police chief. One that will do the job that we hired Daniel Garcia to do, bring labor and management together. While a vote of no confidence is not binding, it does send a clear message of the pulse of morale and gauge sworn employees' feeling of support from the man that is placed in the position of the job to lead them. It will also show the community who we work for what type of leader their police chief is. After all, a leader is someone that will be followed. It will show the city manager the degree of progress that has been made since the employee survey. If the results show what I believe they will, the community we serve, the mayor, city council, and the city manager deserve more from a police chief. Let's hope that they take steps to make that happen. Craig Tiger was the final straw that broke the back of confidence and removed what little bit of morale was left on the department. But don't get me wrong, this item is merely one of the many actions that this police chief has manifested during this disastrous tenure since coming to the Phoenix Police Department. Just to highlight a couple really quick, because we've got dozens more, just wanted to make sure that the media was aware that many disciplinary decisions that this police chief has made, especially when he makes it on his own, which he seems to like to do as opposed to allowing community input, have been overturned at civil service boards and outside entities. That's a waste of tax dollars. That's a waste of your dollars. Your tax dollars could be better spent if we had a police chief that had faith in the system that's already set up. And just discipline, I'm not opposed to discipline. What I'm opposed to is unjust discipline. So when just discipline is deployed, we don't waste tax dollars. He's also been disingenuous with the public and the media when he talks about our hiring progress that we're making, and yet our numbers still continue to decline. He also talks disingenuous with the public when he talks about bringing a county attorney in on police-involved shooting investigation, a course that happens anyway. There are dozens of more examples, like I said, and we'd be willing to discuss it in the future, but those are some of the highlighted examples that we have. In conclusion, please don't use this to impact the confidence that you, the community, have in the brave men and women who do the work. The officers, the sergeants, and the lieutenants, and even some of our command staff. We are committed to you, the community. We get the job done. The community deserves nothing but the best. The crime rate is down. The crime rate is down because of the blood, sweat, tears, and yes, at times, mental health of those that serve you. Despite the tyrannical environment that we have to work in, and for anyone else to try to take credit for that is shameful. I also would like to say that Chief Daniel Garcia once told me that the reputation of this organization is not bigger than any individual. But what happens when that individual is the police chief? Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Captain Bloodworth, would you like to come to the podium? Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Tom.
I've been many times in the time that I served as a police officer that I would say to myself, boy, I wish I was anywhere else but here. And today is certainly one of those days. We had a moment of silence for a family, but we need to have more than a moment of silence. You need to look at the pictures of the children of Officer Tiger and ask yourself, if those were my children, how would I go forward from today? I don't know how they do that. It is an humbling experience to be asked by an organization like Plea, Police Sergeants and Lieutenants Associations, to come and speak on this issue. Because I've been retired for 19 and a half years, people. And I served as a commander for about, I think, 16 years of that time. I worked for the Dallas Police Department for 2.5 years before coming to Phoenix. I have loved every minute of my Phoenix police career. The citizens of Phoenix have been absolutely wonderful to work for. They still are, and they deserve the best police department that we can give them. We being the members of the department and also the elected officials of the city of Phoenix and the state of Arizona. They deserve nothing less than that, and for years we've been able to give them that. People like Charlie Thomas, who was the chief prior to my coming to Phoenix, Paul Bluebaum, Larry Wetzel, Ruben Ortega, Dennis Garrett. Those people were leaders. They had varying degrees of, I don't know, what would you call it, leadership approval, employee acceptance. Some of them were really good. Some of them officers still talk about, not necessarily in flattering terms. What makes a good leader? God, I wondered why on earth I was asked to come after being retired this number of years. And what I was told was because you had our respect and credibility. That's the essential element of leadership in any organization, is the credibility that the people who are doing the job that that organization exists for, the credibility that they give to that person at the top. It's that willingness to, somebody said earlier, I'd follow you into the gates of hell. You have a tremendous amount of, oh golly, I don't know what to call it, skills, abilities, commitment in men and women of the Phoenix Police Department and public safety throughout the state. The things that they do every day, that they see, stay with them for their entire career and beyond. Once a month, there's a group that, and I'll try and clean up this title a little bit, it's a group of retired officers and dispatchers that will gather together for breakfast. And they usually do it used to be at the Big Apple. They closed the Big Apple. The group moved to Deer Valley Airport restaurant. It's informal. It could be anywhere from 20 people to 75 or 80, all retired. It used to be called the Old Blank Breakfast. Now it's more generally acceptable to call them the retired folks, the older community. But it's interesting to go up there and talk to the people there. But from my personal experience, I go in there and I talk to people and I see them, and I can remember one in particular, motor officer, had a really bad on-duty accident. And I got to ride with him in the backseat of a police car from the scene of the accident to Good Samaritan Hospital. I still remember what he looked like in that car after hitting a vehicle making a left turn in front of him at an intersection, and it's breaking literally every bone in his body from his lower jaw to his chest. And that's been probably 35 years since I took that ride with him. Those kinds of things stay with you. I can still remember, with a little less than a year on the department, a Christmas Eve radio call, check welfare. 5-year-old child, 3 o'clock in the morning, walking East Van Buren. No adult with them. Turned out, when I found the child, and I found the trailer park that her parents had been living in, the trailer was empty. The trailer park manager did not know that the people renting it had children, or he wouldn't have rented it to them, he said. There was no food, there was no heat, there were no Christmas toys. This is Christmas Eve, Christmas morning. So I'm taking this 5-year-old to a foster home. She wants to know how Santa Claus is going to find her, because she's not at home. That was 34 years ago, and I still remember it. Like I say, it's an humbling experience to be here, and I wish I didn't have to be. I would recommend to you a writer named Joseph Wambaugh. He writes about the police culture. He's a former Los Angeles Police Department sergeant. He's written a number of books. The common theme that you'll find in almost all of his books about police officers and the police culture is his message is that the physical risk that officers face is great, but greater than that is the emotional risk that they face. That's what's hard to see, but oh boy, does it exist. So if you want to understand the police culture and the factors that work on them, I'd recommend Wambaugh. The other person I would recommend is John Douglas, who was one of the originators of the FBI's criminal profiling section. He's written several books, Journey into Darkness, The Mind Hunter, and he deals with the issue of, forming the serial killer unit, how they did that. But he also deals with the issue of how his work in that area affected him. Anybody who's looking at a career in criminal justice, in any categories of police officers, criminals, whatever, should read those two authors. Chief Garcia and I had some parallels. I started my police service career after leaving the Army as a Dallas police officer in 1962. Yeah, I was working as a Dallas police officer in November 1963. I think, and when I read his resume, which is interesting, I would highly recommend that you have an opportunity to review the resume that Chief Garcia submitted. He mentions that he was a runner-up for the Rookie of the Year award in 1978. Another parallel, I was the recipient of the Rookie of the Year award in 1962, I believe it was. I didn't make sergeant with the Dallas Police Department. It didn't have enough tenure in there to take the test. But I came to Phoenix as Chief Garcia came to Phoenix. I did notice in his resume I think he went from a sergeant to an assistant chief. I don't know how you do that. Well, I think I do. Usually assistant chief level is appointed by the police chief. Subordinate levels of supervision, lieutenants, sergeants, commanders, are competitive civil service examination. Police chiefs sometimes have a tendency to view disagreement as disloyalty. And they remember that when it comes time to appoint somebody to that level. Probably why I stayed a commander for 20 years. But I want to reiterate a couple of things. Any success I had as a police supervisor, leader, whatever you want to call them, was attributable to the people that I had the privilege of working with. And they confer that credibility on you, and you have to live up to it. At every level of supervision I ever was promoted to, be it sergeant, even from the day I was hired, probationary period of 1 year for officers. Same thing for a sergeant, lieutenant, captain. I served about 3 or 4 probationary periods. Later, when I retired and I wanted to be a reserve deputy sheriff, I got to go through that whole background investigation process, including a psychological test and a polygraph. I think basically what I'm trying to tell you is Chief Garcia had his probationary period, and he did not successfully complete that probationary period, in my opinion. And I know what would have happened to any officer who failed to meet a successful probationary period. It's time to take that action. And the people that need to take that action are well aware of their responsibilities to the city and the citizens. Thank you, and again, boy, I'd rather be anywhere than here. And I think most of you feel the same way.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks,
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Next, we'll have Roger Lohr, who is a pastor in the community and a citizen. Not just a citizen, the boss. Thank you, John.
Hello, my name is Roger Lohr. I'm pastor here at Mountain View Christian Church in Phoenix. I apologize, I've been fighting laryngitis all weekend, so I hope you can hear me. My church has been serving for over 6 years, trying to reach out to the police officers in this community and support them, providing in any way that we can to let them know that there are people out there who care. I've had the unique honor to get to know quite a few police officers in our community, and we truly have a great police force here. And so my heart broke last week when I heard about Officer Tiger taking his own life. Working in ministry, you know that the pain of suicide passes on to a family for a long time. It's almost unbearable, and it leaves questions asking, could we have done more? After I learned about the events preceding it with Chief Garcia and with how the city has treated this officer and let him down, he was injured in the line of duty, and we did not provide for him. And so I have the same question. Could we have done more? It's my understanding that both his personal psychologist and the city psychiatrist diagnosed him with PTSD, or PTSI, stemming from the shooting that occurred while he was on duty. Had he been injured physically in that, he would have been taken care of. He would have gotten all of the medical care, leave, and assistance humanly possible. Had he been killed in the incident, his family would have received enormous support from this community, from the department, and they would have been taken care of. Instead, due to the stigma of mental health issues and the sad state of leadership that I've observed in our police department, this officer was mistreated and discarded by the very department that he served. This issue is compounded by the growing awareness we in the ministry and counseling community have of PTSD, related to the wars that our nation is fighting. The egregious issues recently that have come to light here in Phoenix from the Veterans Administration should have been a wake-up call to all of us, including the police department. It should be obvious to us that there are other officers out there suffering silently. We know statistically that police officers deal with depression, divorce, and PTSD at rates greater than the rest of society. And our police officers are afraid to stand up and ask for help for fear of loss of career, loss of promotion consideration, loss of benefits, or just the stigma within the department if they need help. This is unconscionable from a humanity point of view, and from a practical point of view for a community where our police department is struggling to keep officers on the street, where we are below the required need of officers that are out there. Why would we let those go that we need the most? We have to ask how many other officers are struggling out there. I watched the video with the reporter Donna Rossi, and her final question to the chief is one that we need answers to. Will it take another Craig Tiger before we do something? I'm also concerned that Officer Tiger did not receive the normal review board hearing, but was taken directly to a Loudermill hearing with the chief, who disregarded the findings by both of his counselors. It's my understanding that the frequency of these Loudermill hearings and number of times the chief has disregarded recommendations from the review board, handing out punishments that were more harsh than recommended, have increased under his administration. I have also heard that the chief has revamped his discipline choices and increased the levels and severity of the punishments that he hands out. I'm not a police officer, but I know about leadership. And the job of a leader is to care for your subordinates, to be aware of the sacrifices that they make and the dangers that they face. It is not for an authoritarian who demands total loyalty and control to himself. Mayor Stanton and City Manager Ed Zerker, I laud your efforts in the last couple of days to review how we handle PTSD in this community, but I'm here to tell you it's not enough. As I've worked with our officers in the recent years, I've observed that there is a pattern of fear within this department. Officers are afraid to ask for help. Sergeants and lieutenants are afraid to make decisions that don't fall exactly in line with leadership. Commanders are afraid to offer up ideas that might disagree with the chief. There happens to be a culture here that makes it difficult for healthy change to happen. I would like to make it clear before I continue any further that Mr. Clear and Plea did not solicit my statement. I'm not a union guy, I'm not a politics guy, and I'm not a police officer. I called them because I was so angry and felt that something needed to be done. Somebody has to stand up to protect those who stand up to protect us. The City Council must get involved here and demand answers as our representatives. If our chief is that far out of touch with his line officers, perhaps it's time to consider someone else for the job. Chief Garcia and the city absolutely owe an explanation to Rebecca Tiger and to Officer Tiger's children. He owes an explanation to the officers who serve this city, and he owes an explanation to the rest of us in this city. I'll end by repeating the question that Donna Rossi asked. How many more Craig Tigers will it take before we stand up for them? Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, we'll go ahead and conclude, but I just want to say thank you all for coming, the representatives, our other public safety partners, and you, the community, and our members. I also want to give a special thanks to Sean Matson, the president of PPSLA, and frankly to the sergeants, lieutenants, and some commanders on the Phoenix Police Department, because true leadership is not defined by what you wear on your sleeve or on your collar. It is defined by what words and actions, and most certainly by the courage you exhibit in difficult times. And make no mistake, these are difficult times. I thank you, sergeants, lieutenants, and some commanders of the Phoenix Police Department for standing with us and address this leadership crisis at the Phoenix Police Department. Thank you. And we will be taking a vote of no confidence. We're going to start today, and we'll be, some of the members here have ballots already, and we're going to be doing that. Before we do that, though, I think I'll open it up for questions, if anybody has any.
Joe, how does that process work? And what's the result? What happens to the result? And what kind of weight does it hold?
Well, the process is that we are going to conduct a vote of the membership, both memberships, and through probably December the 10th. We'll be doing a first-class mailing to every single Phoenix police officer and ask for them to participate in the vote. Once that vote is tallied, we'll provide the results. I don't know what the vote's going to be, but I can only tell you that from the information that I've received from the Phoenix police officers, plea members, for some time now, to my detriment, we have been trying to avoid this. If you'll remember when we did the survey, the professional survey that both Plea and PPSLA and its members authored and funded it to the tune of $12,000 just so it couldn't be criticized by the city and city leadership, I believe at that time had a tremendously high disapproval rate of the chief. Everyone was certain, and frankly, a lot of our members said now is the time. We didn't want to go there. We wanted to work with this chief. We wanted to make him successful, help make him successful, but I'll be honest with you, it's been a dismal failure. And to some perhaps justified criticism from some of my memberships, maybe I went too far, too long, but that's okay. We're here today. Depending on the outcome, which I think it's going to reveal that there is no confidence. I heard on the radio today, one of the talk show people said that it appears that the coach has lost the locker room. And I believe that is going to be found out to be true. And therefore, I believe he'll be an ineffective coach. Yes.
Joe, police chiefs make tough decisions every day, not always knowing the ramifications. And on a given day, they're accused of being too soft or too tough. Is it possible that too much blame for this terrible tragedy is being, pointed right at one person?
Let me see if I can answer that. No. When you're the chief, the buck stops here. First of all, I don't know how anybody could sit and listen to Officer Tiger's story and not have empathy and compassion. That is a quality of leadership. It is void in this individual. I'm all about accountability. Police officers, like everyone else, need to be held accountable. When you see this situation for what it is, I've never been a detective, but when the man tells you that on the anniversary, this is what he went off to do, and he tells you what he's going to do, we call that a clue in police work. He totally dismissed it, totally unmoved. How could anybody not feel for Officer Tiger in that spot? He had options. I will tell you that when he first got here, we had a discussion about officers being arrested for DUI, and I told him, I think you're right. I think we need to up the ante on that. I told him, short of termination, I'm okay with, because people have issues. He issued a ENS, an employee notification system, in regards to DUIs, and he said, you'll be subject to termination. Even the current policy does not demand or dictate absolute termination. There's discretion. I feel he failed miserably in exercising that discretion with Officer Tiger.
And do you know, looking back, was there something the association did or perhaps could have done more to help Officer Tiger cope with the PTSD?
I will tell you that I responded to Officer Tiger's shooting that day. We represented him. Craig was a quiet guy anyway, but he himself didn't know the magnitude of what he was dealing with. Frankly, a lot of times they're the last one to know it and actually move to action. We did not know. It was not until he got his DUI that it became apparent and clear that he was struggling with this issue. And once that happened, he did get help. He did get treatment, and he was responding extremely well to the treatment. And he'll tell you that. And what I think happened is we, the Phoenix Police Department, specifically Chief Garcia, cast him away like trash. They should have given him what's called the last chance agreement. Craig, here's your opportunity. Here's your suspension. You're going to have to, pay the piper on the DUI. Got no problem with that. Here's your last chance agreement. Here's what I want you to do. We've done this before. You got to go to this treatment. You got to see this person. We're going to be doing, we have the right to do any random blood alcohol test on you to ensure that you're sober, that you're sane, and performing appropriately in discipline. We had those options. We've done those options. Why not do it for Officer Tiger, who so clearly suffered from an on-the-job injury, and the chief didn't care? I personally find it unconscionable that he did that. As regard to what we did, when he was in the treatment, And what started, I believe, his downward spiral again was the loss of his employment. That in and of itself, as you know, is a significant emotional challenge in anybody's life, PTSI or not. And I think what happened is we just kept piling the bricks in his wheelbarrow, and the burden got too heavy and it tipped. And here we are today.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think when you fail to help an individual's crying for help and you just add to their burden by termination, I think it's difficult to overcome, and especially with somebody who is suffering already. The loss of hope, despair.
Joe,
Yes.
what do you say to the people who say, you guys call for no confidence vote for another police chief? I mean, seriously, you've got 2 in a row here. Do you just not want a heavy-handed leader that's going to hold you guys accountable? He came in, he wanted the department to look more professional, so he asked for, get rid of the Class D, I believe it was, uniforms. He wanted to tighten up on some disciplinary issues, all things that the community, quite frankly, probably would like to see. They want to see officers held accountable. We do hold you guys to a higher standard. So, is it all the chiefs that you're going to get rid of?
Well, thank you for the question, Donna. For the record, this is only the second time in our 40-year history that we've called for a vote of no confidence on a police chief. It has been, matter of fact, rather ironically, I have 18 months left to go before I retire. When I first came on the police department in '82, we called for a vote of no confidence. And here we are again some 32 years later. So I would disagree with your categorization that we call for votes of no confidence on police chiefs. It is true that we had some difficult times with the prior police chief. But with regards to this police chief, look at our actions, look at our track record, our history with him. Again, 1 year into the job, we did a survey, essentially his probationary performance management guide or his performance report, and it was dismal. My members, the officers, were saying, the guy's not going to make it. He's no good. We don't like him. We don't like it. We said, hold off. We're going to work with them. We want to try to make him successful. Believe me, the best thing for everybody, us, the department, the city, the community, is to have a successful, competent police chief, a leader of the biggest department in the city. We want that more than anybody. And we had tried that. We have tried to work with this man. The problem is he's an authoritarian. He is a megalomaniac. He is not interested in your input. In fact, if you speak out against him and have a different idea or suggest that he may not have the greatest of idea on an issue, stand by, you'll be transferred to Car 4, and the fun begins. Because that's how he governs. That's how he rules. He doesn't govern, he rules. Leaders inspire people to follow. Absent that, you have a dictatorship.